All right, so this is going to be my second video of the day, and it'll probably be the last one I do today. I did just get back from the pool, so sorry I don't look my best for this video. But this video topic, I'm going to be talking about my pregnancy struggles with Silas. Because I think it is really important that young women know that they have a right. Like, young pregnant women know that they have a right to get the care that they deserve. So, for people that know my story, you guys know that me and my husband experienced a miscarriage in 2017. I was 17 weeks along, and when I went into my doctor's, just a regular routine doctor's appointment, they were unable to find a heartbeat. And I remember I had my cell phone out. I was recording the ultrasound. I was recording the appointment because my husband wasn't there and I wanted to show him and let him hear the heartbeat. So I recorded the moment I found out that my baby had passed away. And it was honestly one of the worst days of my entire life. The baby died around 14 weeks. They never were able to find a rhyme or reason. But basically I had had a miscarriage, which meant that the baby had passed away, but my body didn't recognize it. And so I carried Arrow for about 4 weeks after he had passed, he or she. Don't even know the gender. So I had a really hard time with that. And after I had lost Arrow, obviously I was like blaming myself and everything, and I was like, I really need to get pregnant again, because I had fallen in love with that baby already, and I loved being pregnant, and I was like, no, I want this now. I want this now more than ever. So me and my husband, immediately when I started to heal, we started to try to get pregnant, even though the doctors were like, no, you need to wait at least 6 months to a year. We got pregnant in January of 2018, again with Silas, and I had found out at about 5 weeks with a blood test. I had taken multiple pregnancy tests. My period was like 5 days late, and the pregnancy tests were all like negative. And there would be a faint line appear, but it wouldn't appear for like 5 to 10 minutes after I had taken the test. And so it was hard because it was like, okay, this is either just an evap line or there's something going on. Like, I can feel it. I knew deep down, I was like, I am pregnant again. So I went and I got a blood test, and me and my husband were sitting at one of the restaurants here in town when they called to give us the result to tell us that it was positive. And I was about 4 weeks, 2 days pregnant. So after that, me and my husband had gone to Flagstaff for our anniversary, and on the drive back, I had started spotting, and I was pretty worried because I didn't spot the entire time I was pregnant with Arrow. The whole 17 weeks, there was no blood, there was nothing, like there was no indication that I had miscarried with that baby. And so the fact that I had started spotting with Silas, I was like really freaked out. I was like, oh my God, I'm going to lose this baby. I'm miscarrying. And I had called the Naval Hospital, and I was like, hey, I'm spotting, or no, we had gone straight to the ER. And I'm going to have to catch myself a lot of times when I'm talking to you guys about this, because it's like once you give birth, everything about the pregnancy kind of like leaves your brain. So there's a lot of stuff that memories that aren't going to be exact, and I'm gonna have to correct myself. But anyways, we went to the ER, and they confirmed like I was spotting, but my cervix was closed, and they did an ultrasound, and they found the gestational sac, and it was still intact and everything like that. But obviously it was too early to find a heartbeat. So they were like, well, everything looks good. They took my blood, my quant levels again, And if you know anything about that, it's basically your HCG hormone is supposed to double every 48 to 72 hours in order to sustain a pregnancy. And so they took my quant levels again, and they had like tripled since the last time I had my blood test done. And they were like, well, everything looks normal, other than the bleeding, everything looks normal, like your cervix is closed, which would mean that you're not miscarrying. The quant levels have continued to go up. We were able to see a gestational sac on the ultrasound. So just come back in about 2 weeks for a follow-up appointment. And at that point, we will be able to see a heartbeat. And I was like, okay. But obviously I leave and I'm like worried because the bleeding doesn't stop. The spotting doesn't stop. It's like old brown blood. And they told me, they were like, well, it's not bright red blood. So until it becomes bright red blood, you don't really have anything to worry about, because brown blood is an indicator of old blood. So it could be blood coming out from when the baby implanted in the uterine wall. It's like, okay. I wasn't having like cramps. I wasn't having any other symptoms of a miscarriage. But, it just continued. And in my mind, I'm like, dude, I am worthless. I am going to lose this baby. I'm going to lose this baby, and I'm actively miscarrying, and no one's doing anything about it. And I called the hospital again, and I was like, I had a miscarriage last year, and they weren't able to ever tell me why. I have a feeling that my hormone levels are off because, obviously, like, when you're pregnant, Google can be your best friend or your worst enemy. And sometimes it can be both at the same time. So I was like looking stuff up, and I'm like, low progesterone, and then I looked up and I saw what progesterone like has to do, like plays a part in the pregnancy and everything like that. If your progesterone levels are low, then your body will not sustain the pregnancy. It won't hold it. Basically, progesterone is responsible for building up the uterine lining to keep the baby intact and everything like that. And I was like, no, there's something's off. And like there are symptoms of low progesterone, like low energy and low sex drive and all this other stuff. And I was like, you know what? And then low progesterone also has to do with vitamin B, like vitamin B deficiency. And I remembered, I was like, oh my God. Back in 2011, I had gone to the chiropractor, and they had done a bunch of blood tests on me, and the chiropractor said, you are vitamin B deficient. So, and they gave me sublingual B, so it's like the liquid vitamin B that you put underneath your tongue, and it absorbs into your bloodstream faster. And and like low hormones actually run in my family. So that made a lot of sense to me, and I was like, it's my progesterone levels. That's the problem. And I called the Naval Hospital, and I was like, look, I need you guys, I need to see about getting progesterone. They're like, well, I'm sorry, but we don't prescribe progesterone to women who haven't had more than 3 miscarriages. And I'm like, that does not make any sense. Why would you want to allow someone to go through that 3 times, more than once? Like, 1 time is enough, and you want to say that they need to go through it 2 more times before you do the necessary things and the necessary testing to make sure it doesn't happen again? It's not just my body that's going through this. It's my mental state. If I have to go through this again and again and again, like, that's not fair. It's not fair for anyone involved. So I had my follow-up appointment 2 weeks later. So I was about 7 weeks. And I go in, and me and my husband, I had already in my mind said, this baby is dead. I am miscarrying. I was not expecting to hear a heartbeat. I had already told Forrest, I was like, we lost the baby. Because my bleeding started to get a little bit, it started to get a little heavier, but it still remained brown. They laid me down on the table, they did the ultrasound, and there it was. A little flicker. The best sound in the world, the heartbeat. It like blew us away. Me and Forrest were like, oh my God, this little baby is still alive. We could not believe what we were seeing. We couldn't believe what we were hearing. It was just crazy. And I had talked to the doctor, and I was like, and she didn't think that she was going to see that either, because she had actually invited a couple of, I guess, students, people that were like training, into the room. And she was talking to them like, okay, now this is a special circumstance. Like, she was not expecting me to still be pregnant, the baby to still be alive. And I asked her afterwards, and I was like, look, I really think my progesterone levels are low. Can you guys test them? And she was like, well, no, we don't do those tests on women until about 16 weeks, and or unless you've had more than 3 miscarriages. And I was like, but I know this is a problem. Can you just test it? I know this is a problem. No, I'm sorry, we don't do that. And I was like, okay. I start freaking out. So at this point, I'm like 9 weeks pregnant. 2 more weeks go by and I am still spotting. I have been spotting for 4 weeks now with no sign of it letting up. I decide, I'm like, you know what? I'm going to order my own blood tests, and I'm going to go get my blood drawn at a local LabCorp. And you can do this. I forgot the website that I used, but you can go online, and I'm sure you can look it up. You can go online and you can actually order the blood test that you need. You have to pay for it. I paid $55. They sent the blood test over to LabCorp, and I went and I took it. And I paid online the $55. I get the results back 24 hours later, and just as I suspected, my progesterone levels were really low for what they should have been. They should have been over like 24, 25, and they were at like a 15. So I immediately called the Naval Hospital and it was like a holiday, so none of the departments were open. It was just the ER. And I call the ER and I'm like, hey, look, I was in a few weeks ago for spotting. I'm 9 weeks pregnant. I had my progesterone levels tested. My progesterone is low. I need you guys to prescribe me progesterone, or I'm going to lose this baby. And the nurse had the balls to tell me, well, you know, if that's the case and your progesterone levels are that low, you just need to prepare for a miscarriage. And if you are to come into the hospital or to the ER, we probably wouldn't run any further tests on you. My husband was livid. He went up to the Naval Hospital and he tore into the person, and they were like, you know what, I'm sorry, like that should not have happened, but we don't prescribe progesterone. We just can't order that blood test. And so I was like freaking out because I felt helpless. I was like, what am I going to do? Just sit here and allow this baby to die? Like, I can't do that. I know the problem, you know? And the thing is the progesterone is not something that will harm you if you take it and you don't need it. It's literally just a hormone. So my mother, I switched on to a different version of TRICARE to where I could go out and see a doctor that wasn't on base. And I went through all of that because I was still on my stepdad's insurance. She found me a doctor in the area because, you know, I still need my mom's help with things. And I was so overwhelmed and so stressed out. And I called and I spoke with them and I was like, look, I need help because I just took my progesterone levels and they're low and no one's helping me, and I just need this, and I need help. Like, I feel helpless, like I feel like I'm just doomed. And a high-risk doctor at that clinic called me back within an hour of me making my initial phone call. And without even meeting me, without evaluating me or anything, she said she was appalled at how the Naval Hospital treated me. She was appalled. She was like, you know what? That's ridiculous. You know, your progesterone levels should be tested right away because progesterone is essential for pregnancy sustainability. She said, your progesterone levels are lower than what I would expect to see at this gestational age. They were wrong for telling you that progesterone isn't tested until 16 weeks because we will put women on progesterone if they have had at least one miscarriage and they're high risk. We will put them on progesterone right away, and we usually have them stop at about 14 weeks when the placenta takes over. So them telling you that they wait till 16 weeks to put people on progesterone if they need it is absolutely ridiculous. I'm going to prescribe you progesterone suppositories, and you can pick them up. I'm going to have them delivered to you tomorrow because they overnighted me the progesterone suppositories. These, any men watching or children, whatever, I'm going to be real vulgar with you right now, so I hope you're prepared. But these are suppositories that go inside of your vagina. And you put them in once a day, depending on the strength. Sometimes if they're low strength, you can put them in twice a day. But she got me on the progesterone. Literally the next day, so one day after I had been on the progesterone, the bleeding had stopped completely. And I had been spotting for 4 to 5 weeks at this point. And it just stopped completely. And I never started spotting again. When I had my first ultrasound with my new doctor, the new doctor's office, the baby Silas was measuring about a week and a half behind. And that's not good. Like, that's too far behind, especially that early on. So that was another indicator that, like, he wasn't getting what he was supposed to be getting from me. Well, 1 week after being on the progesterone, I went in and I had another ultrasound. My doctor's office kept a close eye on me. And I think in the total course of my pregnancy, I probably had about 15 ultrasounds compared to like the 3 that you normally get. They paid such close attention to me. They monitored me. They listened to me. They had nurse, like an after hours, like nurse hotline. But when I went in and had another ultrasound, Silas measured exact where he was supposed to. His growth caught up. He measured exactly like to the day. Like I was like 13 weeks, 4 days. He measured exactly 13 weeks, 4 days. So like I said, when I was like, I'd been on progesterone for about a week and then his growth caught up. It's not true. This is just the first ultrasound I had since I started the progesterone. And maybe it was a coincidence, maybe it's normal for early on babies to like measure a little bit behind and then they catch up. But the rest of my pregnancy, Silas measured exactly to the day. He wasn't a day ahead. He wasn't a day behind. He measured exactly. I stayed on the progesterone until about 20 weeks, even though they were like, you can get off of it at 14. I didn't feel comfortable doing that. I was like, no, I'm going to wait a little bit longer because I don't trust that. I don't trust it. I don't feel comfortable getting off of it. It didn't hurt me. In fact, I actually still have progesterone in my fridge because you're supposed to keep it in a cool place. The moral of the story, and of course now I have a wonderful, happy, healthy child. Obviously, I did go into labor early, and that's indicative of low progesterone levels because normally they'll keep women on progesterone. People who have a history of preterm labor will normally stay on progesterone for every pregnancy until about 33 weeks. So I did go into labor early. And I do think that it had something to do with me getting off of the progesterone. But it also had a lot to do with the fact that I had polyhydramnios as well, which means that I had too much amniotic fluid. So my uterus was, even though Silas was only 7.5 months, my uterus measured to be 9 months. So my body thought, okay, it's time. That's why I gave birth early. So it could have had something to do with me getting off the progesterone that caused my fluid levels to rise. But all in all, the whole point of this story is to tell you guys that if you ever have a gut feeling, trust it. Do not let anyone walk all over you. Go for what you want. Don't let people tell you no. You go for what you want until you get it, because you're the only one, when it comes down to it, you're the only one looking out for you. I believe firmly that my child would not be here today if it was not for my persistence, if I had not had my progesterone tested, if I had not gotten on progesterone, I would not have my baby. I would have lost him. There was just too much that happened for it just to be a coincidence. And I can kind of explain a little bit of what progesterone is. So your body, when you're pregnant, releases and produces a hormone called progesterone. And what that does is that thickens the uterine lining, and it helps the placenta. So your placenta, which is basically a whole other organ that your body creates, it's a whole organ system for that baby. It filters things out. It's like a heart. It's like a brain. It's everything. It's like a stomach. It's literally an entire organ system just in one organ, and it continues to double in size. By the time you give birth, it's about the same size as your baby. But that placenta does not take over until about 14 weeks. So until 14 weeks, your baby is getting all of the nutrients directly from you, directly from your uterine lining. And if you don't have a strong or thick uterine lining, your body can't sustain a pregnancy. And sometimes it ends in miscarriage or preterm labor. Your placenta, it helps the development of the placenta. It helps the placenta stay attached to the uterus. So, progesterone plays a huge role. If you've had miscarriages in the past and you just don't know why, like they've tested your chromosomes and it's just unexplained, have your hormones tested. And if people try and tell you, oh no, progesterone's not that big of a deal, progesterone doesn't matter, it's not an essential hormone, they'll tell you everything. They'll be like, well, progesterone levels aren't really something that's like, no one knows exactly where your progesterone should be. That's true, but there is a range where it should be. They don't know the exact number. For every woman, it could be different, but they know a range. So, I have hair dye all over my hands. Go with your gut. Always trust yourself, and do not stop fighting for what you believe to be true. If you have a gut feeling about something, do it, because it's better to be safe than sorry. I would rather have gone to the hospital every single time I had a feeling about something than to have not gone one time and lost the baby when it's something that I could have prevented. So, get your hormones tested, look out for yourself, and always trust yourself, because a mom's intuition, it'll surprise you. You'll know when something's wrong. And it's kind of weird because when I miscarried with Arrow, I kind of felt off because my stomach wasn't growing. It wasn't where it was supposed to be for being 17 weeks. I didn't have any pregnancy symptoms. Progesterone also plays a huge part in pregnancy symptoms. High progesterone levels can cause nausea, morning sickness and stuff like that. So like I said, just trust your instinct and don't give up. Don't let doctors tell you no. Don't let them walk all over you. If you have a doctor who's not willing to give you the care that you think you need, find a new doctor.